You're listening to a Life in Quebec podcast. For more, visit lifeinquebec.com.
Welcome to Election Perspectives, our regular look at the 2015 Canadian federal election campaign. I'm Andrew Greenfield from lifeinquebec.com, and this is week 10 of the 11-week campaign, and the last recording that we're going to do before polling day. As ever, we're joined by Colin Standish, a former prospective Liberal Party nominee for the riding of Compton-Stanstead in the Eastern Townships of Quebec. He's a political science graduate and is up to speed with the goings-on in the federal political scene. Welcome, Colin. Thanks for being with us.
Andrew, thank you once again. It's wonderful to be 10 weeks in and looking down the barrel of a gun at a new government on October 19th.
I know, we're very nearly there, aren't we? But before we get to this week's questions, I'd like to start by having a little word about the Conservatives. To say I'm disappointed is a massive understatement. Conservative supporters have been invited to all of our recordings and have never responded to us, so we've never had them on Election Perspectives. In the interests of fairness, they were continually invited despite us being roundly ignored by them. The candidate in our riding was invited, with all the other declared candidates, for a round-table chat on October the 7th. 3 candidates did come, the Liberals, the Bloc Québécois and the NDP. We got to put a number of questions to them, and you can see the video in the politics section on lifeinquebec.com. The Conservative candidate in our riding did not respond to our invite. We would have loved you, the Conservatives, to have been involved, if only for a sense of balance and fairness. That no supporters or members of the candidate's team ever responded to our regular invitations smacks of extreme arrogance. Whoever is telling you not to talk to the media, and indeed the electorate, needs to go and stand in front of the nearest mirror and give themselves a stern talking to. Why won't you talk to us? Are you being muzzled from above? Well, maybe you are. To emphasise the point, the party leaders from the Bloc Québécois, the Liberals and the NDP and the Conservatives were invited onto popular French language show Tout le monde en parle in the last couple of weeks. No prizes for guessing the only party leader to decline the invite. Again, Conservatives, why won't you talk to us? So, Colin, moving on. Here's the first question. Reports coming in that advance voting is hitting record high numbers. What does this mean for the election?
Well, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, Andrew, and I always try to make time for Life in Quebec, and it really was wonderful to see you sit down with the 3 different parties, or 3 of the 6 parties and candidates in Louis Hébert this week. It was really a great format. I think we saw some intensity, but we saw respectful debate, and people fighting for every vote, as it looks like Louis Hébert, the riding you're in, will be one of those swing ridings, which we'll talk about a little later in the session. But to come back to your original question about advanced voting, yes, it's a great question. I guess the 2-day statistics are in that I think there's about 1.6 million Canadians have voted Friday and Saturday, and that's up about the 1.2, if I recall correctly, that happened in 2011. So I think that's really showing a lot. That I went and voted today, actually. So I was actually not feeling so well, but finally got up to the polls early. So what does this mean for the election? It means there'll probably be a higher turnout overall. I feel like a lot of young electors are actually using this vehicle. That a lot of people I know at the age of 30 are actually talking about it. It seems it's something you see on Facebook and social media. It's actually well known that usually advanced polling is sort of one of those things that your grandma knows about, that she goes to avoid the rush the day of, or your parents maybe talk about. But it seems to be more part of the landscape this year. It's just an easy way to get voting out of the way before the day of when you might have to work. So I think it's wonderful. And sorry, Andrew.
No, I was going to say I know that you talk about the younger voters. I know that Rick Mercer, well-known TV personality, he's been quite active. Targeting the young voters, get out there and do it. And have you seen any of that stuff?
Yeah, no, I did look at the Rick Mercer one about young voters, and also, we're the ones that Canadians, electors, are the ones who define this election, not any party. And it's great to see Rick Mercer back in the game with his famous sort of back alley speeches. And I think youth are, I've been a youth that's tuned into politics probably a bit too much so for most of my younger years. But I think people are talking about this advanced polling. It's sort of part of the lexicon versus it was something that wasn't well known in the past. So it's really wonderful.
Okay, let's so quite a high turnout then for the advanced polling, and that's wonderful for the week ahead, I guess. Now, a few days ago, the NDP offered the Liberals a formal coalition in the event that this becomes the only way to oust the Conservatives. Apparently the Liberals have refused. Is this a good move for either party?
It is interesting to talk of coalitions where in 2008 it sort of came up after the election with Dion, and then in 2011 it sort of it seemed to sort of hurt the Liberals and Ignatieff at certain times. I think it's strategic on the part of perhaps the Liberals, though I think Mr. Trudeau has rejected it even when the Liberals are sort of looking very much third party in this election, and obviously third party in the House of Commons before the writ was dropped. But for the Liberals, basically, and even the NDP, to sort of say, you know what, there's on the side of the spectrum that's left of Mr. Harper.
Really, it seems that the Liberals have been more effectively able to brand themselves as agents of change, and I believe the last 11 days they're leading the polls. So they're at 36%. Conservatives are about 29-30%. NDP has dropped about 24.5%. So we're seeing the differentiation as I think you and I and many other political observers knew that after October 1st, the last 3 weeks of election, people were going to start to tune in a bit more. So what's strategic is then you're making voters make a choice. You're saying you can't really, don't go with your heart necessarily between NDP and Liberals or even Green. Is that really you have a choice between Liberals, is what obviously Mr. Trudeau and many others are expecting you to make the choice, or between the NDP. So to offer that sort of, the NDP's offering that, I'm not sure what their strategy is necessarily. But they are in a position of weakness now that it looks like they will be the third party, and their vote is collapsing all around them. And so in the last week of the campaign, you could see that even go more belly up. And another thing, I just want to go back to the advanced polling. That one thing is that Liberal Party and some of the internal discussions I've had with the Liberal Party members and some organizers is that in 2011, had they had more advanced polling and higher turnout of it, they really could have actually won up to half a dozen more seats. And you saw some seats fall by just 12 votes to even just 2 dozen. So so to lock in this sort of percentages, certainly the Liberal Party that's very high right now, is actually a good way to preserve your front-runner status, right? Because what could happen in the next 7 days, right? We don't know. That the Liberal Party could start pulling downwards if something happens, if there's a misstep. So that's, just to go back to the advanced polling, it's very beneficial to sort of lock in your numbers, sort of like on a game show. We can lock it in a week before the actual polls.
Now, obviously, we can't do that, and come the day, people are going to go out there and vote on October the 19th. Now, voting strategically, or strategic voting, what is it, and can it work, and how can it work?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Just the whole concept of strategic voting is essentially, to vote for, is to ensure that the preference that you don't like will not be elected. So if you don't like the Conservatives, what is the best vehicle for change, for example? Or if you don't want the Bloc Québécois to be elected, what is the best vehicle? Or Liberals or NDP. So, for example, if you're looking at a swing riding like Trinity Spadina, it's Trinity Fort York, or Spadina Fort York now, downtown Toronto, you have about 41% vote NDP Liberal. And essentially, if you vote for the Conservative or Green Party, you're probably going to allow the NDP or Liberals to win. So if you really, what's your preference between NDP and Liberals, will make a lot more sense to vote for the one that you like the most or dislike the least, right? So that's essentially strategic voting. It's just, it's to sort of aggregate your preferences towards what you do want, and that might actually change your overall preference. If you care about the environment, you're probably not going to vote Green Party in most seats outside of Lower Mainland BC. You might vote for Liberals or NDP, or even Conservatives, depending on what your positions are. And so that's a bit about strategic voting. Is just to ensure that that your personal preferences maybe won't win, but is it ensure what the one you like more than that is closest to your personal preferences will win, and the one that you dislike the most will not win.
Now, you've talked about the big three there, the NDP and the Liberals and the Conservatives, but obviously in Quebec there's a fourth party. There's a Bloc Québécois. You can't rule them out. They're there. They're popular in some quarters, not in all, but in some. Now, so in terms of strategic voting, there's four parties within Quebec province. I mean, how would it work here, for example?
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great question, and certainly, if you look at a lot of the swing ridings, like Gaspésie, La Madeleine, Louis Hébert, you can see there's a variety of ridings in Quebec that are really four-way splits now. You've got 25% of the vote in some of these ridings between the Conservatives, Liberals, BQ, and NDP. So strategic voting is quite different here. So, it's up to the electors to decide. But really, it seems to vote for who you do want, and it will probably make more sense. But for example, if you don't like the Bloc Québécois and they're first or second place in your riding, you should perhaps take a look at who is the second place. So if I'm a Liberal, let's say, and I am a Liberal, to look in a riding and say that, if I do vote Liberal, it might allow the Bloc Québécois to win or the NDP to win. Well, maybe I'll vote for the NDP above the Bloc Québécois. That's sort of the electoral calculus some people might make. Not that I'm doing that myself. It's just an example.
No, but so let's say you as a confirmed Liberal supporter, as we know you are, would you consider strategically then voting for another party?
Personally, no. I've always supported the Liberal Party of Canada, and I will certainly in this election, and I've always been pretty open about that. And so even if I know my candidate won't necessarily win, I will be voting Liberal. But it's up to people to decide that to make sure that your preference is best represented. Sometimes will not necessarily mean casting your vote for the party you've always supported, and that's one of the distortions in our electoral system, that it's first past the post, so whoever has the most votes wins. That any other vote that is not cast, that's usually with over 40% of a vote in a particular riding, you will win. That those other 60% of votes really don't count anymore, and that's a frustration of our system.
Okay, so the advance polls are open. In fact, they close tonight. It's Monday, the 12th of October, and they close tonight at 8 p.m. They've been on all Thanksgiving weekend, actually. We've seen some people. There's photographs of them, or in the media and in the regular media and social media. There's people wearing potato sacks on their heads. They're dressed in costumes. They've got face coverings. They've got masks on. All sorts of things. Why are they doing this, and what's the point to it?
Sometimes it can be civil disobedience, but I think it's sort of probably to protest some of the niqab issues that were coming out of sort of the Conservative Party and the Prime Minister. So I think it's sort of mild civil disobedience. I think it's great. I think to respectfully show that you might disagree with a policy, as long as you're not, to make a mockery of voting is obviously not something we want to see in this country, to denigrate the democratic system, but to show mild civil disobedience while, of course, respecting the law. I think it's an appropriate way of going about it.
So has that issue, you mentioned the N-word, and it's been dominating the campaign. Has it been used as a smokescreen, do you think, and was it planned in advance?
Yes and no. I think your question is an excellent one. I think it really has to go with the Conservative strategy this time. That there's Mr. Crosbie they brought in. He's an Australian political consultant. He did a lot of work in the United Kingdom for the Conservative Party that led to their electoral success last time after they had a minority or a hung parliament there. I believe it was in 2010 that they formed a coalition with Liberal Democrats. And he has a great quote that he says, is that throw a dead cat on the table, because that's all people are going to talk about. So really, the niqab, and certainly at the federal level, that Mr. Harper has just brought up a very contentious subject and thrown it on the table. And in Quebec, obviously, identity debates have dominated the airwaves and people's political discussion for the last several years. Canada, the rest of Canada rather, much less so. But I think that smacks of Mr. Crosbie that you haven't heard of too much about what he's doing. But I suspect that this seems to be, even though the federal government knows basically legally they can't do it. I mean, they're getting shut down in courts of appeal, and it really doesn't make any sense for them to pursue it. But I think they're just throwing a dead cat on the table, and they're watching people howl and scream.
Okay, so not long now then until voting day. We're, as we record this, we're a week away. By the time it gets on the internet, we'll be a few days away. Now, are we going to see a new Prime Minister, or will Mr. Harper remain in power in Ottawa?
There's going to be a new Prime Minister, whether it's on October 19th or briefly after. I think Canadians are looking at a new Prime Minister. Obviously, I can't predict the future necessarily, but I think it doesn't look like there's going to be a majority parliament, and if there is one, it looks like it would not most likely be the Liberal Party of Canada. Mr. Harper, if he doesn't win a minority, he'll be forced out pretty soon after. Whether he resigns the day of, that is possible. But I really think Canadians should be excited. We're going to have a new Prime Minister on October 19th, or very shortly afterwards, whether it be Mr. Trudeau or Mr. Mulcair, or the Prime Minister Harper could remain in office for several days, weeks, or months. But I think we're looking at a new Prime Minister very shortly, and that's I think after 10 years of Mr. Harper, I'm going to say that's a very good thing.
Okay, fair enough. Now, political affiliation aside, Why is it important to get out there and vote?
Yeah, no, that's an all-important question, Andrew. I appreciate you asking. And it's the basis of democracy in this country is that we've been accorded the right to vote. Hundreds of thousands of Canadians have fought, and over 100,000 Canadians died in the wars of the late 19th and 20th centuries to preserve a lot of the constitutional rights and freedoms that we enjoy today. So I would encourage all Canadians of all stripes to go out and vote if you don't see anything reflected on the ballot to mark it as you see fit, but really to get out there and make sure you go to the polling station is of critical importance. So I would encourage all Canadians of all age groups or above the age of 18 to get out there and vote, and really that they make it as convenient as going in your own condo or just going to the school down your street or in the church basement just down the road. So really the onus is on you, and unless you can think of some sort of reason that no one else has been able to articulate for not voting, I would encourage all people to do so.
Well, Colin, thank you very much. So there you have it. That's the end of Election Perspectives for now. I'm Andrew Greenfield for lifeinquebec.com. See you at the polls on Monday the 19th of October. And remember, whoever you support, make your voice heard. It's your right to do so. Please don't waste it.
Thank you for listening to a Life in Quebec podcast. For more news, editorials, and opinion, visit lifeinquebec.com.